I always thought the worst feeling in the world was being forgotten, until I realized being intentionally ignored by your own family is so much worse, like your furniture they step around or a painting they refuse to take down but never bother to look at, and that pretty much sums up my childhood in the Bennett household, where love was a reward and silence was the punishment for not being perfect like Tyler. He was the son they bragged about, the one who scored goals and scholarships and photo frames, while I was the blurry figure in the background who always got cropped out. I learned early that if I wanted attention, I had to earn it, A's on tests, medals in competitions, sacrifices of every piece of myself that didn't fit into the blueprint they built for me. But no matter how much I achieved, Tyler always shined brighter, and our parents acted like the sun only rose for him. They talked about his accomplishments like they were family trophies, while my successes were treated like lucky accidents. I told myself it didn't matter, that I didn't need their applause or approval, but those lies got harder to swallow as time passed. When Tyler met Brooke, the gap between us widened into a canyon. Brooke was beautiful and confident, the kind of girl who walked into a room and instantly made you feel like you were standing in the wrong place. Mom adored her from the moment she smiled, Dad practically handed her the deed to the house, and suddenly everything, birthdays, holidays, even lunchtime gossip, became centered around their perfect little love story. Meanwhile, I stood on the sidelines applauding like it was my job, because in their eyes, it was. So when they announced their engagement, I expected at least a tiny bit of joy for me, some small acknowledgement that I mattered too, but instead, Mom said, "Make sure you don't embarrass us at the wedding," and Dad added, "Try not to be emotional." Emotional. As if feeling anything in this family was a flaw. I smiled and nodded and pretended like it didn't crush me, because disappointment in our house was a crime punished by cold shoulders and cutting words. That night, alone in my room, I stared at the wedding invitation tucked into my mirror frame, gold lettering spelling out their perfect life, and realized I didn't have a place in the picture, not unless I manufactured one. I wasn't invited as a loved one. I was invited as decoration. But even decorations can fall and shatter if placed too close to the edge. And trust me, this wedding was about to push me right over it. The days leading up to the wedding felt like countdown clocks strapped to my ribs, each second reminding me I was about to walk into a celebration where I was more inconvenience than guest, and Helen made sure I never forgot it, handing me a long list of tasks as if I were the event planner, the maid, and the emotional punching bag all in one. "Pick up the flowers," she said. "Double-check the catering. Make sure Brooke's dress is steamed properly, don't ruin anything." Each order was a reminder, your worth here comes only from what you do for others. Tyler barely looked at me anymore, too busy glowing in the spotlight everyone polished for him. And Brooke, well, she treated me like a stranger she might one day forget she met. She'd smile that tight, pretty smile that never touched her eyes and say things like, "You're so lucky to be part of our big day," like it was some honor I didn't deserve. I kept my head down. I did the work. I didn't argue, even when every bone in me wanted to scream. And yet, the more I tried to be helpful, the more invisible I became. On rehearsal night, guests filled the church with laughter that echoed in every corner except the one I stood in. I watched Tyler wrap his arm around Brooke while our parents hovered nearby, fussing over her veil, smoothing her hair, complimenting every breath she took. Then Mom glanced at me and scolded, "Don't slouch, Jenna. People will think you're jealous." Jealous. That word hit me square in the chest. It wasn't envy that hurt, it was the assumption that the only feelings I could possibly have were ugly ones. I stepped outside for air, but even the wind felt judgmental. Maybe I really was the problem. Maybe they were right about me. But then something happened that cracked the facade I'd been suffocating under. As I stood near the back entrance, I overheard Brooke's voice floating from around the corner, sharp and mean as broken glass. "I can't believe we even had to invite her," she said, irritation thick in her tone. "She's so dull. Tyler's sister is like a placeholder for a real person." The people with her laughed, loud, uncaring, and my stomach twisted because that joke wasn't new. It was practiced. They'd said it before. And they'd say it again. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stood there, letting the truth settle into the space where love should have been. My family wasn't blind to my pain, they were entertained by it. I walked back into the church silently, no tears, no trembling, just a brand new understanding growing where hope used to live. Because if they wanted a placeholder, I was about to show them what happens when it decides to take up the whole damn page. The morning of the wedding felt like waking up inside someone else's dream, a dream where everyone except me got to be the main character with a happy ending, while I was handed a dress 2 sizes too big and told to make it work because Brooke's cousin deserved the prettier one. Helen gave me a once-over, lips pinched, saying, "Try not to draw attention. Today isn't about you," which was unnecessary since every day in this family made that painfully clear. I quietly pinned the loose fabric at my waist and slipped into heels that belonged to someone with smaller dreams and less backbone. People buzzed around the venue in a flurry of flowers, hairspray, and champagne, treating Brooke like royalty while I was a servant dressed up as a guest. Tyler rushed past me without even a hi, too busy being adored. He used to be my best friend before the world crowned him favorite child. I guess crowns make people forget who cleaned up their messes on the way up. When the ceremony started, I was tucked at the edge of the second row, visible enough to prove I existed, but far enough that my tears wouldn't ruin a single photo. Brooke glided in like a queen who'd never been questioned a day in her life, and everyone gasped like she invented beauty. The vows were perfect, rehearsed, dripping with promises she'd only keep as long as it benefited her. Tyler looked at her like she was the sun, and I realized he never once looked at me like I was even a candle. The reception was worse. Polite conversations that left me out. Forced smiles that felt like masks glued to faces. Toasts filled with family jokes no one bothered to include me in. And then, the moment everything changed. I was carrying a box of champagne flutes toward the bar when Brooke's mother stopped me and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Make sure Jenna doesn't drop anything, we don't need her ruining the only good thing this family has going." Laughter erupted. Not one person defended me. Not Tyler. Not my parents. No one. Something inside me snapped like a bridge finally collapsing after years of tiny cracks. My fingers clenched around the box so hard the cardboard crushed under my grip. For once, I didn't swallow the humiliation. I didn't force a smile. I walked away, not to cry, but to do something I should have done long ago. I pulled out my phone. Scrolled through photos. Stopped at a screenshot I kept for the day they'd push me too far, messages from Brooke bragging about cheating during her bachelorette party, laughing about how Tyler would never know. Proof. Truth. Fire in digital form resting in my palm. If they wanted to pretend I didn't matter, they were about to find out exactly how much damage a forgotten girl could do. I stood there backstage with the music pounding like a heartbeat trying to convince me not to do what every bruised part of me was begging for, scrolling through those screenshots like they were oxygen, like justice was finally something I could breathe in deep. And for the first time in my life I wasn't scared of being seen, I was terrified of staying invisible. The microphone Brooke used for her vows sat on a table nearby, still lit from speeches, blinking like destiny was calling my bluff. I picked it up, hand steady in a way I didn't recognize. When I walked toward the center of the reception hall, no one noticed me at first, because that's how it always was, but the second my heels clicked against the stage and I lifted the mic, the room quieted like the universe finally decided to listen. Tyler turned toward me mid-laugh, confused, like he'd seen a ghost step out of the corner where they'd shoved it. I didn't give Brooke time to play innocent. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, and every head angled toward the girl who was never worth anyone's attention until now. Helen's eyes widened, Charles stiffened, Brooke's smile cracked just slightly, because she knew. Deep down, she knew. To the bride, I continued, who said just last week that marriage won't stop her from having fun with the guy she met in Vegas. A ripple of shock tore across the room. Brooke stepped forward, voice trembling with fake calm. "What are you doing?" I ignored her. To the love story everyone thinks is perfect, except the bride herself. I tapped my phone, and her own texts appeared on the jumbo slideshow screen behind us, the words huge, undeniable. "Tyler is clueless LOL." I can still get whatever I want. The silence was so thick it could have shattered glass. Tyler's face drained of color as he read betrayal in fonts big enough to break him. When he turned toward Brooke, she reached for him, whispering excuses that dissolved before they reached his ears. He pulled his hand away like her touch burned. My mom's hand flew to her mouth in horror. My dad muttered my name like a warning, but it was too late to tame the truth. I lowered the mic, breathing harder now, the weight of years lifting with every exhale. Brooke snarled, venom dripping, "You jealous little failure, you just couldn't stand not being the center of attention." I didn't want attention, I cut in, my voice sharp as a blade finally unsheathed. I wanted respect. But since none of you ever gave me any, I decided to earn it. Gasps. Whispers. Cameras recording. A lifetime of silence erupting into power. And right when I thought the damage was done, my brother looked at me, really looked, with heartbreak and realization crashing together in his eyes. But exposing her wasn't the end, because the final blow was aimed not at Brooke, but at the family who made me feel worthless. Tyler's voice cracked the silence first, soft but sharp enough to cut through the thick air. "How long did you all know?" he asked our parents, and that question, "you all," poured gasoline on everything we ignored for years. Because deep down, he already sensed the answer. Helen and Charles stood frozen, rehearsed perfection crumbling as panic bled through their rigid posture. My mother opened her mouth, searching for a lie dressed as concern, but my brother already saw the truth reflected in their eyes. They had known Brooke wasn't good enough for him, but they wanted the image more than his happiness. Tyler looked shattered in a way trophies and applause could never fix. Brooke lunged toward him, clawing for control, spitting excuses, but security stepped in before her screams could twist into violence. Cameras caught everything now, our polished family portrait cracking live. I should have felt guilty. I didn't. I felt free. My father finally turned to me, anger ripping through his voice. "Do you realize what you've done?" I stared right back at him, not shrinking for once. "I stopped letting you decide who mattered." He stepped closer, like intimidation still worked on me. "You embarrassed this family." I tilted my head, almost amused. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true." "If the truth embarrasses you, whose fault is that?" Helen gasped like I'd slapped her, but for once I didn't apologize for existing. I walked toward the exit as the chaos behind me grew louder, guests whispering harshly, Brooke screaming Tyler's name, flashes of phones capturing the downfall of a narrative built on lies. But before I reached the doors, Tyler called out, voice raw from heartbreak. "Jenna." I paused. He stepped forward, tears streaking down his perfect face, the brother I once adored peeking through the cracks. "I'm sorry," he said, voice trembling with overdue honesty. "I should have seen how they treated you. I should have been there." I nodded, the forgiveness not instant but possible. "Learn from it," I whispered, because that was all either of us could do now. Then I walked out into the night air, cold, crisp, real, no longer the girl suffocating in silence but the woman who made the room listen. Outside, the stars looked brighter than the chandeliers ever did. I took a deep breath, feeling the kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission. My phone buzzed, an unknown number offering an interview at a publishing company I'd applied to weeks ago, a new beginning arriving right on time. I smiled. For the first time, the future felt like mine. So if your family ever convinces you that you're invisible, remember, even a shadow disappears when it finally steps into the light.